This tank is one of the free tanks that you can pick up as part of the World of Tanks console, Chinese New Year and Year of the Dragon season for World of Tanks console. So let's have a look at what this OP little light tank can do, and what's even better is that you can pick this one up at rank 25, so almost everyone will be able to get this tank, and all you have to do is be able to purchase the season pass for 2,000 gold, bearing in mind that in a season pass you will always be able to earn the gold back that you actually spend on the season. So if you end up actually making gold, if you can get your way all the way up to rank 96, at which point you get your gold value, plus you will have received all of the commanders and generals and heroes war chests that are available in World of Tanks, and that means that each one guarantees you gold, and actually you'll be net gold benefit out of the season. So of course, with that being said, this tank is just an added extra from just playing the game, and so it'll be a very interesting one for you guys to pick up, and it really is a fun one to play, even if you don't make a ton of silver when you do decide to actually play this tank. It is a tier 6 Chinese light tank with the ability to deal 115 damage per shell. It's 128 pen on its standard rounds, which is pretty low, but certainly can actually use standard rounds up in tier 6 games. However, as soon as you're coming up against tier 8 vehicles, you're going to need premium rounds if you have any chance of penning them, and with 177 pen on the premium rounds, it can, for the most part, at least deal with a lot of tanks, provided that you remain undetected. And given that this is a light tank with some very good mobility stats and some very good view range, nearly 500 meters in the way that we've set this one up, and 275 meters of still concealment, the disparity between when you'll spot an opponent and when they'll spot you is massive, and you can often end up staying hidden whilst farming them for all of their hit points, which is why this tank is very powerful, although it of course follows in the light tank trend where it has absolutely no armor. So every shell that you're going to be receiving in this vehicle is, for all intents and purposes, gonna be a penetrating shell, and you're gonna end up losing health. But that is not one of the biggest things about this tank. The fact that is the limiting factor of a tank like this is in fact the amount of rounds it gets, because typical wargaming to introduce a vehicle where the limiting factor is literally how many rounds you can fire on a vehicle. This one only has 45, and that might seem like a lot, but when you're firing every 2.4 seconds, and that is not including when you're using, for example, enhanced combat rations and you've got the active boost, which will bring it down even further to about 2.15 to 2.2 seconds to reload. Yeah, this tank runs out of rounds very quickly, considering you can fire almost all of your rounds in a single minute. You're firing about 25 to 30 rounds depending on if you've got the active boost when you're using this tank. And so yeah, 25 rounds per minute as a base value, so it would only take you 2 minutes of firing, or just under 2 minutes, to be able to fully unload this tank and have nothing left, which makes this tank one of those that's very powerful when it has rounds, and of course significantly worse when you've got nothing left. And so yeah, this tank is a very fun one. It is a super good vehicle whether you're playing in tier 6, tier 7 and even tier 8 games. This can be a real nuisance for people just purely based on the camo and the view range that this tank has. Of course, you've got good ability to actually outspot people and therefore get assistance damage within this tank. And if you are a seal clubber and you want a vehicle that earns you a lot of W and 8 without having to really try, then this one certainly does that as well. So without further ado, let's have a look at the gameplay to show you exactly what this tank can do and how you can actually play it in game. Now then, the first game that we do have is on Great Wall. Now Great Wall, very good map for playing a tank that can remain undetected, as well as a tank that has really good mobility. And this tank predominantly focuses around maneuvering around the map and finding angles on opposing vehicles such that you don't have a limitation with the penetration of this vehicle. So for example, you come up against a tank frontally that you just can't pen, and so what this tank can do is use the mobility and the camo of the vehicle to remain undetected whilst also travelling away from said heavy tank, for example, that has that armor that you can't pen, and you can redirection or redeploy yourself into a much better position where you can find the side or the rear of vehicles, and you can find a lot more angles with this tank than you can with a traditional slower vehicle such like a medium, and why this tank almost plays like a medium but obviously a light tank at the same time. So you get all the benefits of a light tank whilst also considering that most mediums at this tier are an auto pen. Yeah, you basically have the same stats. The only limiting factor again with this tank is that the hit point pool is not particularly amazing. You've only got 720 hit points, which can certainly be a limiting factor when you are trying to get a lot of damage over time, but often you can find yourself coming up against a lot of opponents that you can farm pretty easily. The only problem, as I said before, is the ammo count. So with that being said, obviously you're seeing me here just trying to farm up some early game damage. Early game damage in World of Tanks console, one of the biggest things that you can do as a player if you are trying to get better, and often there's a lot of spots that you can use on every single game mode and every single map that are going to give you free damage, and often it's a case of kind of learning where those positions would be and where you feel like the best opportunities are going to arise. And you can see on Great Wall we've kind of realised that the enemy team are predominantly on the southern side of the map. Now by pushing over here, we know that there's quite a few people on our friendly team that are going to be up in the northern side of the map, and we've managed to find a little snakebite camping at the back, or at least running backwards from where he was earlier. We found ourselves a little Sherman 3 who's kind of sat on the corner up there, and hopefully we'll get a bit of damage on him later on. Obviously we are going for the shots on the snakebite, get him out of the game, and then we can kind of farm this Sherman 3 hopefully. Now we don't have to load APCR rounds against this guy. I just want to make sure that we can basically pen him every time from the front, because if he ends up actually penning us every single time, it can be a bit of a case of, you're trading 1 for 1 with someone, and so you don't want to have that when you're in a tank that has less hit points, because at the end of the day you're going to end up getting taken out faster just purely because you don't have the hit points. But what this tank can do is things like this. The insane accuracy that this tank gets, followed up by the fact that you reload so quickly, you can lock people down, and that's exactly what we've done to this Yola Wagon SU-100M1 who's come charging down the hill, and unfortunately he's back in the garage alongside some of the other tanks that we've taken out this game, and hopefully we'll be able to get a few more before we inevitably either get taken out ourselves or intentionally run out of ammo and we have to run around trying to get spotting damage. So with that being said, we've got 16 rounds left. We've picked up 2.4 thousand damage in this tank, which equates to about a 4 damage core / receive ratio, which is pretty good for this style of tank. And so we really now have to kind of try and maneuver our way around the map using that 72 kilometers an hour top speed, which is amazing. And the power to weight ratio, because this tank is so small and doesn't have any armor, it's not very heavy, and therefore that power to weight ratio is very good, and so you can basically scoot around the map, go up hills and stuff a lot quicker than you would with normal vehicles, and yeah, just in general works really well as a standard light tank. And so yeah, I really enjoy playing this vehicle. It is a fantastic one for sure, and hopefully I'll be interested to see what you guys actually think about this tank if you've played it before, or maybe you haven't ever seen this tank being played in the game and you're kind of wondering, is it actually worth it? And hopefully this gameplay will kind of show you the upper echelon of some of the games that you can have. Obviously you are limited on the total amount of damage you can deal with this tank. I think it's about 5,000 total damage that you can actually physically deal in a game, which for a tier 6, yes, I mean that's pretty good game, but it's certainly nowhere near the standards that you would see as the total maximum damage you see in some of these Soviet tanks. Now what you're seeing me do here is reverse backwards. Now 90% of the time this would not be a good play, but with regards to the Type 64, what that offers me is the ability to kind of charge forward if I do get spotted. Now we find ourselves a nice little T1 heavy here. The thing that we don't want to get hit by is any of these two tanks. The KV-122 has a 122mm. There's a surprise. And the T1 heavy has 240 or 280 damage. Not entirely sure off the top of my head. I am not a super low tier player, usually sitting around tier 8, tier 9, tier 10s as these standard tanks I kind of play. But as soon as you come down to this tier, it is supremely easier generally to play tanks, just purely based on the fact that, you know, when you've got the experience at higher tiers, you're playing up against people that have played the game for longer, and you'll then drop down to the lower tiers. You can often find players that have either never played the game or they've very rarely played the game, etc. And it's just an easier experience in general. Now I'm going for this archer over here, and I was hoping that there wouldn't be anything else, and unfortunately there is. The IS-2 misses, and so we can get 2 shells into this guy at least before he's reloaded. And in fact, it may have even been possible to get a 4th shell into him, but unfortunately for me, I did actually bounce that first one because I didn't fully aim, allowing him to get a little bit more of a potential to kind of get us some more damage. And unfortunately, the IS-2 actually decides to come YOLOing down. Now, I don't know whether that was maybe a good play or a bad play, because ultimately I could have literally been sat there pre-aiming and we probably would have removed him. But unfortunately, it's the typical timing of World of Tanks where you look down to see if you can get down the hill behind you, and as soon as you do that, someone comes around the corner. It's not too big of a problem, but we picked up 2.8 thousand damage, which for a tank like this is pretty good, especially in this low tier matchup where you're playing as the top tier. Often there's not actually that much damage to be had in the games, and you have to really be the only one dealing damage if you want to have, you know, 3.5 to 4k games, unless of course you're playing in an IS-2. We had a brilliant game, obviously shadowing what we did, but yeah, 7 kills by the IS-2 there, obviously a very, very good game. And of course we had a fairly substantial one in the light tank, dealing just over 1.5 times basically what everyone else on the team did. But yeah, not too surprising when you're playing in a pretty OP little light tank, and it really is a ton of fun, and I highly recommend you guys try it out. Give it a go, and if you don't enjoy it, let me know, or maybe you do enjoy it and you found it to be one of the better tanks. I know a couple of you commented on the recent video where we looked at the news and what is actually available in the season pass, which you can have a look at from a couple days ago. But yeah, this tank, very, very solid, really, really fun one to play. And certainly when you start getting into the groove of things and you can find people out in the open and you're dealing damage to people, other light tanks, etc. This one's a very solid one, just based on that rate of fire and the overall damage per minute that it can kick out. And yeah, hopefully that was a good showing of what this tank can do. We don't really need to kick into a ton of gameplay, as you can kind of get the gist. Very fast firing, very fast tank, capable of spinning around heavy tanks very easily, and of course just being able to lock people down like you saw with the SU-100M1. Hopefully today's video was a short and concise video that you guys got the information that you need to, and overall definitely a tank worth at least trying out from the season pass, and a brilliant free vehicle considering that you actually make your silver or gold back from the season pass. So highly recommend getting the season pass every season if you have the gold available on your account. If you don't, if you think you're going to be playing this game any length of time, then it is 100% worth it. It's like the cost of a beer for the sake of a load of rewards from the season pass. It is the best thing for your money that you can actually purchase in the game, as you make more gold than if you were to not have, if you were to actually just buy the gold outright. So highly recommended. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like it, and of course subscribe for more videos coming soon alongside all of the other season pass tanks that were available as part of this season right now. So stay tuned, even the brand new tanks will be coming out tomorrow, so have a look at those as well. And I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.